This is
Make it plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Folks, if there was ever a time to talk about paid leave for all, obviously it's right now. It needs to be in some type of corona relief bill. The bill that passed in March left millions of workers, including grocery workers, restaurant workers, and healthcare personnel who are working on the front lines without a single paid sick family or medical leave day. And it's akin to big businesses and franchises sucking dry the small business loans that were passed in the CARES Act and that Congress just replenished. There is a paid leave for all campaign. We're going to hear all about it from its director, Dawn Huckelbridge, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Dawn, how are you doing? And first of all, how are you and your family and your loved ones doing in this pandemic?
Well, thank you for asking, and thank you, first of all, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm lucky because I am healthy and I'm well, and I'm able to work from home and collect a paycheck. So for that, I feel truly blessed. My loved ones, my family are all pretty well. My brother did get COVID, but he recovered and he's been doing the quarantined alone and getting better. So I'm grateful for that. And I have some friends who've gotten it too, but I think that's the story many of us have, is that we know people who are contracting this and getting sick. And it could be a lot worse. There are people on the front lines right now risking their lives every single day. So in the scheme of things, I feel healthy and lucky, and I feel like it is my job to make sure that we do more for the people who are exposed.
Well, glad to hear your brother has improved and is better. So that's good to know, and definitely appreciate the work you're doing. I don't understand it, Dawn. Why is this just not an automatic thing? Why are we still fighting for something that should just be? And I was talking to another guest. Other countries.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no political debate. Soon as this happened, there was, okay, we paying everybody's income until this gets. So please.
Yeah.
I don't want to get upset. Let me just let you talk about it, because.
Yeah, no, it's what is really hard to understand is, for me, it's very hard to fathom, is that we are one of the only countries in the world today that does not really have a national paid leave policy. In terms of family leave, it's us and Papua New Guinea. We are one of the only industrialized countries that does not mandate paid sick days. And these policies, they're not just for individual benefits. They are for the whole. They're for society and the collective. They protect us all. They boost bottom lines. They help businesses. We find that evidence again and again. So it's shocking that even now we have to fight in the middle of a pandemic, when we see very clearly before us, if we hadn't already, how what happens to one person, what protections they have or do not have, how that impacts all of us. Mm-hmm. And so I agree with you. To me, it is shocking, and I'm just hopeful that in this situation, people start having a really new understanding of what these kinds of protections mean for families and individuals, our neighbors, our friends, but also just for us and for our economy too.
So it's obviously just politics that prevents it, and I presume the relationships that some politicians have with big business, right?
Yeah, I do think that has been a hurdle. What we're trying to explain is that a lot of that is just a myth, though. That in the long run, that providing paid leave for your workers improves your bottom line. They will be happier, they will be more productive. You won't have turnover. You'll save costs in terms of finding new workers and losing talent. So we're really trying to correct that misunderstanding. But also, I think some of this has to do with what people see as the role of government. And there's this idea that, we shouldn't be, government shouldn't be forcing businesses or people to do certain things. What I hope, though, is right now we see how much we do indeed need that, because we can't rely on employers to kind of provide these policies piecemeal. You shouldn't, your fortune should not be dependent on what your zip code is, or where you work, or what kind of work you do, or who you love. That this should be something that we put in place in a comprehensive, sustainable way for everybody. And to do that, we need a really robust federal policy on paid leave.
So in one of the bills they passed, am I correct, there was something paid leave-ish in there?
Yeah. So
didn't go far enough.
Yeah, exactly. So there have been many rounds of legislation and negotiations in the midst of this pandemic of what do we do to help. There's so many needs right now. And in the Families First Act, for the very first time, the Congress put into place emergency paid leave. And so for that, we're grateful, because it did help millions of workers. And what it did is it asked employers through reimbursements that will allow employers to give 2 weeks of paid sick days to workers, and also some limited form of paid leave, mostly around school closures for families. So it's something, and we're grateful for that again, but it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It left out, estimates are up to 106 million workers in this country. If you do get COVID, you probably need more than 2 weeks of sick days. Recovery can be weeks. It didn't provide for really that. If you had to care for someone else in your family who got sick, it doesn't provide for that. And it left out lots of people. It left out businesses with employers with more than 500 employees. It left out essential workers on the front lines. It left out, because of this big business carve out, it left out pretty much all the major grocery store chains, pharmacy chains. The Department of Labor went on to even make it broader, to carve out this really broad definition of healthcare workers. So literally right now, the people on the front lines, disproportionately low-wage workers, workers of color, women, are not protected. They're not given these very basic protections that will keep them safe and help them if they need to get tested, if they get sick, if a loved one gets sick. But it also means that all of us are going to be exposed if these essential and frontline workers don't have these protections too.
So did they think that $1,200 was supposed to cover all of that?
Who knows what they were thinking. But I think what's so ironic to me is we now recognize these workers are essential. They've been essential for a really long time.
Yeah, really. That is interesting, isn't it? Before
this pandemic hit. And yet we carved them out of these very simple protections that will save their lives. So to me, that's not valuing workers.
Even though we're just now calling them essential for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Dawn, you are clearly smarter than I am.
I don't agree with that, but yeah.
But so now I was good in math until I got to high school and discovered baseball and girls. But I know a little bit about math. All right. So Dawn, help me out here with some math.
Okay. I'll try. I'm not so good at it either. I really capped out at algebra.
Okay. Well, but this is just simple arithmetic. Now, if I've got all these workers mm-hmm. and all of them get sick, and I don't do anything for them or create a means for them to care for themselves and their loved ones so they come back to work, how do I still have employees?
Exactly.
That's kind of 1 + 1 = 2, isn't it?
Right. I think you get to the heart of it there, is that in a pandemic this is simple math. This is common sense. And these policies have always been common sense. Protect your workers, protect your business, protect your bottom line, protect your consumers. And I think now it's just ludicrous, that we're basically making these essential workers expendable. And we're saying you don't deserve the same protections that the rest of us do, many of us get the privilege of staying home. So no, it's to me, it is unconscionable. And it's bad math and it's bad business.
So we you always look for silver linings, at the very least, in educating and informing people, because you got to educate people to organize and mobilize.
Right.
So maybe there's a sliver of hope that the meat packers story, right, is getting some attention. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's right where everybody can get. So wait a minute now, this doesn't sound right, right? So is that an opportunity you think for people to really realize what's going on? And then you have a president who's saying emphatically, yeah, you need to go on back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. I mean, forget all of that. Doesn't matter what happens to you.
Yeah. I mean, this is my great hope.
Okay.
That this pandemic is bringing to light how work that has been undervalued and in many ways invisible to a lot of people for a long time. We're suddenly now being forced in this very dramatic and literal way to see how their conditions impact all of us. So yeah, the meat packers who are predominantly people of color, same with farm workers, same with these essential frontline workers, all of the people who make our lives work and make the economy work every day and are so critical to the success of this country, and who have been again undervalued, and also care workers, people in homes, healthcare workers. We did a press call recently, and we had a home healthcare worker join us named Joyce from Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
She's been working for more than 30 years as a healthcare worker. She starts before 7 a.m., clocks out around 10 p.m. Works to take care of two people who need assistance or are disabled in their homes every day. And she said that COVID is in one of the homes where she works. She said, I literally have no PPE and I cannot do my job from 6 feet away. That's not possible. And she doesn't have she doesn't have paid leave. She doesn't have a sick day. So these are the stories that this has been a crisis in the making for a long time. It didn't start with COVID. It goes on before. It went on before, and there will be crises again in people's personal lives and in public health in the national scope. But I'm hopeful that we're starting to see now how this impacts us, and it shouldn't take a crisis like this. But that is my hope, that we'll start seeing how the people on the warehouse floors, the people helping us in our homes, the people at the grocery stores, that all of this, we're all tied together. We're only as safe as the most vulnerable worker in our society.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's more important now. And the last question before we get into what we can get Congress to do, but it's more important now as you have some of these states wanting to prematurely end lockdowns, phased or however. So there's a greater likelihood, a certainty, that if you start opening stuff up and people start going back to work, they're going to get sick because we're not past this pandemic, right? So if there was ever a time to talk about paid leave, it's now. Exactly.
So you said it just right. We've needed this for a long time, but particularly now as we start to reopen, we're not flattening the curve anymore. States start to reopen, we need to have these protections in place. There was just a poll out actually that asked, what is the number one policy that we need right now to protect us as we reopen? And the American people said paid sick leave. It was something like 88%. I don't know why the administration is throwing up roadblocks and why they're resisting this. It's what voters want. So I encourage all of you to reach out to your member of Congress and ask them to close the loopholes, at the very least in this emergency paid leave policy that we have, to make sure that people on the front lines who are serving us and helping us and keeping us safe every day have the same protections that we'd want for our own families.
Democrats, I presume, pretty much support it.
Well, so no, what's interesting is that's kind of, we do presume our biggest champions are Democrats often, but also it has broad bipartisan support.
Okay.
Finding majorities in both parties do actually support this. So I think that that's a disconnect in terms of what folks in office and folks in leadership assume. This is a bipartisan issue, and it's not a political issue.
But who are our political opponents right now in Congress? Guess one. Is McConnell one of them?
Well, I mean, for a lot of, he's been blocking a lot of the good things that we need right now.
We know he is.
What I will say is what's interesting about paid leave is that it has bipartisan support. I do think there are different opinions about how we should achieve it. And, what we talk about in terms of my campaign, when we talk about paid leave for all, we're talking about something that guarantees you time if you are sick or if you need to be with loved ones. It's something that gives you a meaningful wage, something you can live on while you take that time. It's something that is inclusive and doesn't leave anyone behind. It understands that right now family, needs to have a modern definition of family. So there's things like that that we don't want to compromise on. And a lot of things that are put out, particularly by this administration as quote unquote paid leave, we say are actually neither paid nor leave. So a lot of the policies that have been put out in the name of paid leave are actually taking away from other benefits. So it's, taking away from a child tax credit, or it's taking away from your retirement. It's taking away from things you've earned. And so we say it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's not what paid leave is, and it doesn't help families, and it doesn't guarantee you time, which is really critical.
Speaking of bipartisanship, some numbers I have here that your team has shared with me. A supermajority, 87% of voters, including 91% of Democrats and 86% of Republicans, said all workers should have access to emergency paid sick, family, and medical leave.
Yep.
So I guess then it's getting the elected officials on Capitol Hill to realize that.
Yep.
And honestly, Dawn, I think it's our duty, when people get ready to go vote in November, this is everything's on the table.
Exactly.
And if you aren't taking that seriously, you got to go. I mean, that's pretty much, this is bread and butter.
I agree with you. I mean, to us, a lot of what we feel like our job is to make sure that this is a priority for candidates, for elected officials, and that voters and people in this country hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So this should have been happening for years, but right now, even in this crisis, as people are dying literally every day, if you're not in support of this policy, which is so common sense and saves lives, then yeah, I hope voters do remember this in November.
So for those who are obsessed with the economy, even sometimes more so than human life, can you explain to us what paid leave does to not drain the economy, but actually benefit the economy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of literature that really is behind the fact that this policy improves bottom lines for small businesses, for the economy as a whole, for also for families' economic security, for their health outcomes, for maternal mortality, for infant mortality. I mean, it's just it's an investment that supports us from the bottom up. And so there are a number of states that have passed paid leave, and we've been following them closely and looking at studies and evidence. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that businesses have not found it hurts their bottom lines. In fact, it's a boon. And they don't have to lose money in terms of turnover and training new people and finding new people. They're keeping their best workers. They're keeping them really productive and happy. And also, I mean, again, there are countries, almost every other country in the world has figured out that this works and they can afford it and that it helps. The families and the economy have changed so drastically in this country in the last 50 years, and our policies haven't kept up.
Right.
So if we want to, get through this pandemic, and if we want to, be successful going into this century in a modern economy, that we need to have some of these policies in place.
Yeah. So so there are businesses who are doing this on their own. A business can choose to do that. How widespread is that? Businesses that are actually taking the initiative to go ahead and do this. And do we know how many have decided to implement it on their own in this crisis? Is there any way of knowing that?
So I couldn't tell you who has decided to do it on their own in this crisis. It's kind of different. But what I can tell you is that most workers in this country do not have it. When this pandemic hit, 33 million workers did not have access to one single paid sick day. And 4 in 5 workers had no access to paid family leave. So it is the vast majority of companies do not provide this benefit at all.
So is Congress and the law really the incentive that those who could do it on their own need? I mean, why can't some of them, just knowing that it works in some, knowing that, I mean, if I got a business, I know I need employees.
Yep.
I mean, what is the disincentive for me doing it on my own and waiting for Congress?
I mean, I think, there's a lot of fear about it. People don't understand it. People assume that this is just going to hurt their bottom lines. They worry it's going to hurt their profits. So I think the task before us is to help do a lot more education to help people understand that's not the case. But also, we don't want to keep doing this piecemeal. When this pandemic has made it clear that, we can't keep just pulling things together piece by piece. We don't want to be scrambling in a public health crisis, that we want to make sure that we can provide some level of support and protection for all the workers in this country. Again, regardless of what state you're in or where you work, all work should have dignity, and all workers should have some level of basic human protections. So we believe really strongly it is in the benefit of everyone in this country to have a comprehensive federal policy for paid leave.
Is paidleaveforall.org, Dawn, organizing and mobilizing citizens to contact their members of Congress?
We are. So if you're listening to this, I would ask you, please, you can go to our website, paidleaveforall.org. Right on the homepage, you should find a link, take action. You can click a button or two and contact your own member of Congress to ask to close the loopholes and to pass paid leave, expanded paid leave in this country to cover, particularly right now, frontline workers. We also, if you follow us on Twitter, we're putting out petitions, we're putting out calls to action, phone numbers, all these things all the time. And this is the time right now, this week, to make your voice heard, because they're negotiating the next relief package, and there are too many people whose lives are on the line.
Yeah. Folks, Dawn is talking about you and me. This is no longer that somebody else, it'll never happen to me. This affects all of us. So take the time to do it. Go to paidleaveforall.org and get involved. This is very, very important. And it's always good to leave people with an assignment. That's what we like to do around here. So go to paidleaveforall.org. We don't just have these conversations to make people mad. Dawn didn't come on here just to upset me. These are some rough numbers. So the only way we can address these is if we act. And so in this time off, you all can go to paidleaveforall.org and get organized. Everybody's on Zoom and webinars. You all doing any webinars and information sessions for people to learn more about the importance?
We are. I know everyone's zoomed out, but we are. We're connecting both the work that we're doing within our campaign independently, and we're lifting up all of our partners who are doing wonderful work right now. So follow us on Twitter, and you can tap into all those things. Yeah.
So yeah. I know she's right. Everybody's zoomed out, but this is important. This is life and death, because they're going to make us go back to work, and you need to be protected when you go. So, if there's anything to prioritize, it's this work here. paidleaveforall.org. Dawn Huckelbridge has been our guest. She's a director there. Dawn, thank you. Keep up the great work. Anything we can do to continue to help beat the drum, just let us know.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for joining us. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.